Our question at this time concerns the action that the Bible talks about as one being blotted out of the book of life. And the question was, what does that mean? What are we talking about when the Bible says that someone will be blotted out of the book of life? It's an interesting study. It's an interesting thought here that comes into mind. It's a very scary thought at the same time. But it's one that really just carries with it the idea of being rubbed out. Like one might blot out or erase out of a book something that you have written there. The original term is exilipho, and that's E-X-E-L-I-P-H-O, exilipho. And it just means to be rubbed out, to be erased, or blotted out. And whenever you look in the Bible, you read about this. You'll read about in the book of Exodus. There's one place you'll read about. This is where Moses is speaking. And when Moses is speaking to God after the people had committed the sin of idolatry because they had built the golden calf, you remember? And then after this time, Moses destroyed the golden calf. He melted it, he destroyed it, and caused the people to drink the ashes and so forth, and then killed the people. About 3,000 died that day because of this. But if you look in Exodus 32 and verse number 33, what you're going to see here is that God said, or rather Moses said there concerning this, that if you will, he said, blot me out of your book. And what he's asking is this, that you would forgive the people's sins. And he said, if you won't do that, blot me out of your book. In other words, instead of them. Well, he's of course trying to take the place of the Messiah. He can't do that, of course, but that was the idea. He says, blot me out instead of them. I will take their place. Well, he couldn't do that, and God goes on to explain. He says, you can't do that. But rather, when it comes to the man's own sins, he'll die for his own sin. But our point here is that word blot. Blot me out. Moses understood that even at that time, that God could blot out, he could erase, as it were, he could exilipho that name out of his book of life, as it, and that's what is being discussed. That's what's being talked about. It's a dangerous and it's a terrible thing to think about, that somebody could be blotted out of the book of life. But God says that is a possibility. If you look over in the book of Luke in chapter 10, at this time we find that after the disciples have come back, they've been out preaching, they've been out, in fact, performing miracles. And they speak to Jesus about this in Luke chapter 10, amazed that the demons, of course, would listen to them. They had power over the various diseases and so forth. And that's when Jesus tells them at this time, he says, don't marvel about that. Don't be excited that you have that power. He says, but rather that your names are written in the book of life. In other words, that was what was the greatest of all. And of course then implied in that is the danger if your name is not there. Certainly it can be blotted out. It can be erased. And I need to understand that. I can see this also in the book of Revelation. Where in the book of Revelation he speaks about those who are written in the book of life, but he also talks about those who have been blotted out of the book. Those who are blotted out, those whose names are taken away. And so whenever I think about that, you read here in the book of Revelation 22 and verse number 19, he says, if anyone takes away from the book of the prophecy, I will take away their place out of the holy city, out of the tree of life, and the things that are described in this book. He can take it away. He can blot it out. See, and I need to understand that. It is true that if someone is a child of God, someone has followed the Lord's will for a time, but if they refuse and turn away from Him, their names can be blotted out. Their names can be taken away. And because that's the case, I need to make sure that I'm faithful to the Lord. I need to make sure that having believed on Him, believed on Jesus as the Son of God and been baptized for the remission of my sins, that I then remain faithful to Him. And if I'm not faithful, see, your name can be blotted out of the Lamb's Book of Life. Don't let that happen to you. Be faithful to the Lord. Revelation 2 verse 10, Follow Him all the days of your life. Be steadfast and unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. And that way we know that our names are written in heaven, that our names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life, and we can look forward to that eternity with God one day.